It's Monday, February 7, 2011. In this week's BeakerBeat, Pfizer sharpens its axe and takes aim at R&D and a massive restructuring of their business model. More on that. Plus, trusting the French is always questionable, but they're reporting new details that could lead to a long-awaited buyout worth billions. And it was once the dream of many writers to pen the great American novel, but for one former pharma executive, it's a form of punishment. All that and more in this week's edition of BeakerBeat. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of BeakerBeat. I'm Mike Justice, thanks for tuning in. We're here at yet another old car show. We love old car shows. It's like going back in time. Speaking of going back in time, looks like Pfizer's going back in time as far as what they're going to spend on their R&D budget. Pfizer's new CEO, Ian Read, has been on the job just a few weeks, but he's already making massive changes at the world's top drug maker. First, he shook up the org chart within the company, and now last week, a bombshell. Pfizer will cut thousands more R&D jobs as it changes how it does research. First, let's quickly cover money, as in fourth quarter results. A tax benefit and rising sales from products gained in its Wyeth acquisition helped Pfizer just beat Wall Street expectations. Profits nearly quadrupled, but overall sales are slowing, and the company said its revenue will drop next year. Plus, Read announced a $5 billion stock buyback plan. Those future money issues, with several drugs falling off the patent cliff, are a big reason why Pfizer's cutting $1.5 billion from its R&D budget, from an estimated $8 to $8.5 billion by 2012 to a new figure of $6.5 to $7 billion. Suffering repeated clinical stage failures, Pfizer says the huge cut in the R&D budget is an opportunity to dramatically change its research culture. The plan now is to outsource part of its trial responsibilities to CROs, drop disease categories that aren't big winners, and collaborating more with academic groups, biotechs, and other pharma companies. In regards to layoffs, the hardest hit is a research hub in Sandwich, England, which will affect about 2,400 people. That lab, which gave the world Viagra, is being phased out. Pfizer will also shift a number of programs, including neuroscience, cardiovascular, and metabolic research, from Groton, Connecticut, to a facility in Cambridge, Mass. So the Groton campus will lose about 25% of its current workforce, or 1,100 jobs. However, the Boston area hub, where Pfizer hopes to gather workers into a central facility, will gain about 350 jobs. To add salt to the wounds of thousands of laid-off Pfizer researchers, just weeks ago the company phased in a new scaled-down severance package. Instead of the 3 weeks of pay for every year served, on top of the standard 13-week lump sum, departing employees will now get 2 weeks plus 12 weeks. Kick them when they're down, I guess. So the broader question here is, will other companies take Pfizer's lead and cut their R&D spending as well? Plus, other companies are going to be looking to pick up on all this talent that Pfizer's letting go. Well, tell us what you think about this story or any story that you see in today's show. It's very simple. Click on the orange button below me. Box will pop up. Type in your comments, send it to me. I promise I'll read and respond to every one of them. And when you're done watching BeakerBeat, check out Beaker's blog and find out which state's biotech industry is announcing plans to hire again. Plus, hear how Merck's CEO Andrew Whitty plans to navigate healthcare reform, the Avandia setback, and his take on R&D spending. Those stories and more on Beaker's blog.
Figaro, 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 Figaro.
The French newspaper Le Figaro claims to have its own insider account of the Sanofi-Genzyme merger talks, speculating that the deal could get wrapped up early this week. The big problem, though, is still the gap between what Sanofi will pay in cash and what it promises in milestones. Le Figaro sources are telling the newspaper that French drug maker Sanofi is offering $72 or $73 a share in cash, plus a contingent value right, or CVR, milestone package worth $2 to $5 a share. Now, Genzyme has been widely reported as pressing for more cash and a smaller CVR, while Sanofi's interests are best served by reversing that formula. Another interesting tidbit, Sanofi and Genzyme signed a non-disclosure agreement. Now, this allows Sanofi to review detailed information about Genzyme, and that was a bone of contention a few months ago. So will a deal get done? Well, was the Maginot Line an incredible failure by the French military? The answer is yes. Stand by for more. Time for quick hits now, and several Nordic countries are claiming a link between a flu vaccine and narcolepsy. Narcolepsy, of course, is a disorder where you fall asleep suddenly and unexpectedly. That's not to be confused with what you do at work every day. That's just laziness. Finland's National Institute for Health and Welfare says there's a link between GlaxoSmithKline's Pandemrix flu vaccine and a spike in narcolepsy cases. Sweden and Iceland also observed an increase in narcolepsy cases. More analysis is being done now by multiple health organizations, and the results will be released in the coming months. Speaking of flu vaccines, AstraZeneca's Fluens, a nasal flu vax, has been approved for use in Europe in children ages 2 up to 18 years and should be available for the 2012-2013 flu season. Senator Herb Kohl of Wisconsin is once again pushing for legislation against pay-for-delay deals. Now he's reintroducing legislation called the Preserve Access to Affordable Generics Act, which would ban those agreements. Kohl and Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa hope to amend the FTC Act, banning any agreements in which an ANDA filer receives anything of value or agrees to limit or forego research, development, manufacturing, or sales of its generic drug for any period of time. If this goes through, it could put a serious dent in profits of branded drugs. Could GSK be preparing to restart a share buyback program? The company just sold its stake in Quest Diagnostics for about $1.7 billion, a move GSK brass claim was done to boost returns to shareholders, but could signal a bigger plan. CEO Andrew Whitty told Reuters in December that the time to resume buybacks was getting closer, and now this move has many analysts thinking that time has arrived. Now, in a statement, GSK did not comment specifically on its buyback plans. GSK originally acquired the Quest stake as partial payment for the sale of its clinical labs business in 1999 and has since reduced its holding in stages. A study published in the Journal of Pediatrics finds that some vaccines may lower the risk of certain childhood cancers, including leukemia. Specifically, children who received the hepatitis B shot were 20% less likely to develop cancer, and children who received both the polio and Hep B vaccines had 30 to 40% lower odds of getting acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Checking money matters, and the fourth quarter was ugly for two giant pharma companies. Well, not that ugly. Still, GlaxoSmithKline and Merck's fourth quarter numbers could have been better. GSK said its net loss totaled $1.12 billion in the 3 months ended December 31st. Compare that with a profit of about $2.5 billion a year earlier. A big reason is GSK booked a $3.4 billion charge to cover Avandia litigation and a possible settlement with the Justice Department. That brings the 2010 legal charges total to more than $6 billion. GSK saw fourth quarter sales drop 11% to about $11.6 billion, hit by new generic competition for Valtrex and a severe decline in sales of the diabetes pill Avandia. Meanwhile, it was a mixed bag for Merck, with a $500 million loss for the fourth quarter, thanks to a $1.7 billion R&D charge-off on its blood thinner Vorapaxar. That drug was once considered a blockbuster, but now may be a total bust. The good news, though, is that Merck's sales rose 20% to $12.1 billion on strong performances from shearing plow legacy products and several standbys like Singulair, Nasonex, Januvia, and Janumet. Generic drug maker Actavis has been ordered to pay $170 million to Texas for inflating the prices of drugs sold to the state's Medicaid program. A jury found that the company had knowingly reported false prices to Texas over a period of 15 years from 1995 to 2010. The case was the first of a series of similar cases, and the fine was more than double any previous defendants had agreed to pay in pretrial settlements. Texas has now recovered more than $420 million from over a dozen drug makers, with more cases on the way. Not a banner week for Pfizer. The company has been ordered by a federal court to pay more than $142 million for illegally promoting its anti-seizure medication Neurontin for off-label uses. The court in Massachusetts granted a request from the Kaiser Foundation Health Plan and other plaintiffs to triple the amount of damages Pfizer had originally been ordered by a jury to pay. Pfizer intends to appeal. A couple of Swiss firms are no longer neutral. Medline Industries has agreed to pay $130 million to acquire CareFusion's Switzerland-based International Surgical Products Unit. The sale will allow CareFusion to focus on its core portfolio. Plus, Canada's Valiant Pharma is buying Pharma Swiss for $480 million, with several million more milestones available. Pharma Swiss is a Swiss-based, privately held branded generic drugs firm. Also from Valiant, they are paying $300 million to GSK for U.S. and Canadian rights to the antiviral cream Zovirax, not including formulations used in the eye. One other deal to mention, Cheshire, Connecticut-based Alexion Pharma has bought Cambridge, Mass biotech startup Talogen for $111 million in potential future payments. So talk about a weird way to get published. And one of the most unusual punishments ever handed out by a judge ordered a former pharma exec to write a book. That was his punishment. Turns out this guy, unlike a lot of writers, did not miss his deadline. Former Bristol-Myers Squibb executive Andrew Bodner, ordered by a U.S. judge to write a book as part of his sentence for deceiving the federal government about a patent settlement, has met the deadline for a preliminary draft. With the fear of jail time hovering over his head, Bodner was able to turn in the preliminary draft about a crucial episode in the drug maker's history. This entire thing started back in 2006, when BMS was trying to preserve market exclusivity for its best-selling drug Plavix. Generics maker Apotex wanted to sell cheaper copycat versions before the patent was due to expire in late 2011. So Bodner, a senior VP, went to negotiate a deal with Apotex to keep another 5 years of market exclusivity for the second best-selling drug in the world. When the company submitted the deal to the FTC for antitrust review, Bodner signed a certification vowing that he hadn't made any commitments that weren't laid out in writing. And that's where he got busted, because he did promise a side deal to Apotex that would have likely led the FTC to say no. Long story short, the shenanigans cost Bodner his job, and BMS agreed to pay a $1 million fine. In June 2009, Bodner cut a deal, and that's when federal judge Ricardo Urbina sentenced him to 2 years of unsupervised probation, ordered him to pay a $5,000 fine, which is not very much, and made him write a book of which the final version would be 75,000 words. So wouldn't it be a bit of irony if this book became a bestseller? Americans do love a rags to riches story, although this is a riches to rags to riches. But anyway, that's it for this week's edition of BeakerBeat. Thanks for watching. I'm Mike Justice. We'll see you next week. And now it's time to go. All the cars are leaving. Which one of these can we take? Sit, Beaker. Sit. Good dog.